Hey, what's happening? This is Deontay Carroll, host of Turn Up the Volume podcast. And listen, I want to let y'all know something. You can follow us on many different platforms. You can follow me on Facebook at Deontay J. Carroll Sr. You can also follow me on Twitter at Deontay J. Carroll, no apostrophe. Also, I'm on Instagram at Deontay Carroll, all one word, no apostrophe. And lastly, you want to follow me on YouTube at Deontay Carroll because I post all of my episodes and post all of my shows from the podcast on my YouTube page. So if you want to continue to stay connected, make sure you like, share, and subscribe and follow me on all of my social media platforms. And remember, until next time, keep that volume turned up. Peace. Be blessed. Good evening. Today is February the 15th, 2021, and I am your host, Reverend Deontay Carroll, and welcome to yet another edition of my podcast, Turn Up the Volume. And I'm excited. I am very excited because I don't have just one guest, but I got two guests, y'all. I have Reverend Jasmine Brooks, a pastor of Macedonia AME Church, and I also have Reverend Melek E.M. Thomas. That's right, Reverend Melek E.M. Thomas of Bethel AME, North Carolina. I believe I said it right. And we're going to be talking about a wonderful subject, a subject that has been on my mind for the last couple of weeks, called the Black Church and Evangelicals. Where do we go from here? And we're really going to be talking about the history of the Black Church, specifically the AME Church, talking about our relationship, the Black Church's relationship with evangelicals, because we have seen it change and evolve over the last several years. And also talking about women's role in the Black Church, and also where do we go from here in terms of our relationship with our white evangelical brothers and sisters. So I'm not going to hold them any longer. I want to introduce my guests. Let me pull them up. My guests we have here. There we go. Let me take them on. There we go. We have the one and only Reverend Brooks. How you doing, Reverend Brooks?
I'm well, thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on. And we also have Reverend Thomas. How you doing, Rev?
Yep, I'm good, man. I'm good. How about yourself?
I'm doing wonderful, man. I'm about excited and just ready to get into this conversation. And so this is the question that I really have, because as I looked at everything that's been going on pre-Trump, during the Trump administration, and even now post-Trump, one of the questions that I had in my own mind, and I want to throw this at you, Reverend Brooks, the Black Church is the Black Church and evangelicals, are they synonymous? Are they one and the same, or is there a difference? Because at one point I honestly thought that they were one and the same, and sometimes people just say their own bits and pieces as it relates to what they believe. So are they one and the same? Are they synonymous?
Absolutely not. The Black Church is the Black Church, and white evangelicalism is white evangelicalism. But I do think that we probably should start having more conversations about how loosely we're going to use the term Black Church, and who's going to be included in that. There are churches with Black leadership. Does that make them a Black church? There are churches with largely Black people in the congregation. Does that make them a Black church? Because for me, well, let me backtrack a little bit. So when you ask the question about, the leadership, what do they look like in the congregation? What do they look like? And does that actually make them a Black church? There are many congregations or institutions where the leadership is Black or the congregation is Black, but the theology is very much so white. And so my pastor said this one thing that's always stuck with me, and I like to use in conversations like these, is that many of these congregations are white evangelicals in blackface. And so there's that in a box by itself. But for me, when I'm talking about the Black church, I am talking about institutions that are doing the work of Black liberation theology, that are doing, that are partnering with the community, that are not just Black people in a space that is performing blackness, but are Black people who are invested in Black lives, Black people who are invested in Black theology, Black people who are invested in liberating not only Black people, but liberating God and the text from white evangelicalism. And living into a new world possible. It's not just about our relationship or as antithesis to white evangelicalism, but who we are and what we're building in our own spaces.
That's a wonderful way of looking at it, and that actually helps me out because I have been struggling with that viewpoint and trying to really come to terms as it relates to what the differences are and what are some of the similarities. And so let's go here, because when we talk about the Black church, to everything there is a beginning. There's a root of how things come to be. Reverend Thomas, what is the beginning, I guess, of the Black church? Because both of you are, Reverend Thomas and Reverend Brooks, both of you are pastors in the AME branch or denomination. And so, to my understanding, that's kind of where you get the foundation of the Black church, of the branching off. So Reverend Melly, what's the history of the AME church? Because a lot of people don't know. Some people know of the AME church, they've heard of it, but they don't really know the history and how it plays into or the contributions that they made to the Black church. So what is really the history of the Black church? I think you're on mute.
He like 70 forgetting to unmute his mic.
Yeah. I believe that the beginning of the Black church did not start with a particular denomination, but it started with those first Africans that were in the hulls of those slave ships who were linked together in chains and started praying to a God to get them the hell out of what they were in. That's the beginning of the Black church, and that stream of resistance, that stream of rebellion against the political, existential, and social death that African people face through the Ma'afa, culminated in the person and in the space of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in 1787, where a freed African named Richard Allen, who bought his own freedom in 1780 and changed his name from Negro Richard to Richard Allen. He and his wife Flora and Absalom Jones and a number of freed Africans and enslaved Africans in Philadelphia had started a very popular sunrise service at the St. George's Methodist Episcopal Church in Philly. And it was growing so much, and he was getting so popular that the white counterparts at that church wanted to keep a better eye on them, and so they put them in the balcony during the 11 o'clock service, and they segregated even the prayer. So that, and people paint this as if it was spontaneous. It was planned. It was a planned act of disobedience, of rebellion, of resistance, where during the segregated hour of prayer, Richard Allen and Absalom Jones and others went down to the altar to pray. And in the midst of that, a white steward comes up to them, taps them on the shoulder, and says, "I need you to move. There is a white person that wants to pray." And this goes on for a couple times, and then immediately after, I think about the third time, Richard Allen, Absalom Jones, and the entire gallery that was specifically built. And I want to make this note that isn't it funny that the first institutional Black church starts because within a church, structures were built in order to maintain systems of white supremacy and segregation.
Talk about it. Go ahead.
So out of that, Richard Allen, Absalom Jones, they start the Free African Society. They debate about whether or not Methodism is the way to go for the ultimate liberation of Black people. Absalom Jones starts the St. Thomas the Apostle African Episcopal Church, and Richard Allen starts the African Methodist Episcopal Church, Bethel African Methodist Episcopal Church, and then codifies it and makes an organization in 1816 with African Methodist movements that were happening all around the colonies, inspired by the Haitian Revolution, for the sole purpose of not only evangelizing the gospel, but going forth in liberation and revolution. I know that was a long way around. But
no, that's good.
That's a loaded question. There's a lot for me to answer.
No, it's good. So here's the thing that both of y'all don't know about. So here's a little bit about my background. So I grew up in the Baptist church, right? I grew up in the Baptist church, born and raised. My daddy is a Baptist pastor. My grandfathers, aunts, uncles, all of them are from the Baptist, denomination. But when I gave my life to Christ, I gave my life to Christ at Varick Memorial AME Zion Church, right in Washington, D.C., 255 Anacostia Road. And so that's where I made the decision to give my life to Christ. And so I do have my own roots, which so have you in the AME Church. And so a little bit of that history, I'm familiar with Richard Allen, Varick, and all those individuals. And so, and what amazes me is the fact that they were very pivotal and relevant into understanding the evolution of the Black church. And what I love about the AME Church is the fact that there's a lot of self-awareness, right? There's a lot of self-awareness about what it means to be Black, loving who you are, loving, where you come from, your identity. And so Reverend Brooks, I want to ask you this. What really is the identity of the Black of the Black church, specifically probably the AME Church? What's the identity?
I'm not even sure what you mean by that question. When you ask our identity, I will say that. Well, I mean, you can clarify for me if you want to before I.
Well, the identity is what does the AME Church stand for? Like we understand Reverend Thomas, he gave us the history, but in general, what does the AME Church stand for even today? And that's kind of what I mean by the identity of the AME Church.
Okay, so I think because you have been asking us about the history, and that's a major part of this conversation, I will just point to the fact that the AME Church was born out of the Free African Society, which I think, I'm not sure if Reverend Melly had mentioned that or not, I can't really remember, but it's born out of the Free African Society, which is a mutual aid society with the sole purpose of serving our community and meeting the needs of the community, of our community that were basically left by our government. So providing insurance, providing funeral services, not even just our government, but the broader community, where we could not have our funeral arrangements at funeral homes in our neighborhoods or nearby us, where we were not being served in terms of having orphanages, where our widows were not being served, where our people were unable to find employment. And the AME Church formed a mutual aid society to meet these particular needs, feeding the people, housing the people, giving them employment, making sure they were insured, making sure that they can bury their dead, making sure that their children who have been orphaned have been taken care of, making sure that the widows were taken care of. And so that is the heart of our institution. Are we perfect at that now? No, we're not. We're not perfect. But we are committed to the African and African Methodism. We are committed to what it means to be Black and to serve Black folk politically, economically. Many of our people, as you see, Raphael Warnock is a part of a long lineage and a long history of our clergy participating in public-facing leadership. So all of these things are a part of our identity. There are probably a million ways or a million answers that you will get if you ask different AMEs in different areas that same question, because even though we are one denomination with one single discipline, there are different cultures, there are different practices, across the denomination. So many people will have many different answers to that same question if you ask them and they're in a different area or whatever the case might be.
Right. And that's the beautiful thing that I do love about the Black church, specifically the AME Church, is everything you just said about, burying the dead and taking care of your people. I believe you have a lot of different communities. You have the Jewish community, you have the Asian community. Of course, we know, Caucasians, they do their thing and they invest in their own communities and invest in their people. And I feel like one of the challenges with African Americans, and Reverend Thomas, I want you to jump in and even give me what you think about this. One of the challenges is we struggle with supporting our own and taking care of our own a lot of times, and I feel like that's our downfall. But the Black church has been very pivotal, even when it came to the civil rights movement, to make sure that you take care of your people, that you take care of those that are less fortunate, that you take care of those who don't have the means, the funds to do what they need to do to be able to thrive and to be successful. And I feel like if we had more of that, and if we champion that more, we would be in a better place, in my humble opinion. You on mute again. He on mute again.
I'm trying to be respectful when
y'all
can't hear me slurping on some tea.
Wow. Hey, look. This is a black show. If you gotta get you something to drink, you might as well go get you something to drink, brother. Go ahead, do what you gotta do.
But essentially, my thought, I was going to respectfully put that because African people have always, in America, have always been engaged in mutual aid. The difference is we are fed this myth that we don't support each other. But we support each other in ways that don't necessarily undergird the system of capitalism. And so it's one way to say that, the Asians and Latinx community supports themselves in ways that Black folk don't. But the difference is, I like the way that my brother Willie Dwayne Francois said it. He said, Asians, Latinx, Jewish folk, they came over here as immigrants. Mm-hmm. Black folk came over here as imports. And so there is a different relationship to wealth, to financial resource, to even mutual aid that we don't possess, mainly because we were not introduced to American capitalism as a subject of American capitalism. We were subject to American capitalism. And so as we have had that foot on our neck for the last 234 years that this country has been constitutionalized, we have always engaged, whether it is Robert Smith, the billionaire who paid off the loans of the graduates of Morehouse, or if it's the quarter parties that my parents used to have, my dad used to have when he was a kid on Division in West Baltimore to help folk pay the rent. We've always been engaged in it. It hasn't always been glamorized. It doesn't always look like something that would end up on the cover of the Wall Street Journal, but we've always been engaging in that mutual aid. So yeah.
And I definitely agree. I do. I feel like while we do support, to what you were saying, I feel like while we do support each other, I feel like sometimes we don't do it enough. Like sometimes we're quick to support other communities and other businesses, but sometimes if you tell some people to support Black owned, sometimes there's a struggle. And I feel like if we improved in that area, and I think that's what I was really trying to say initially when I was making that statement, I feel like if we improved in that area, we would be in a better position. But Reverend Thomas, I want to ask you this because you're a female pastor in the AME Church, and what specifically is the role of Black women in the Black church?
Do you mean the roles in terms of formal positions like a stewardess, or do you mean like what we have contributed, whether it be
what you have contributed, what women contribute to the Black church?
I think that Black women have contributed the same that any Black man has contributed to the Black church or the AME church in particular, from our economic contributions. If women did, well, let's even backtrack from our economic contributions. Mm-hmm. If women stop showing up to church, just putting their bodies in the pews, there would be no AME church. There would be no Black church without Black women filling the pews. Right. Economically, we have supported the church. In terms of our missions and outreach, we have led in those endeavors. In terms of our international impact, women have led in those endeavors. I think there is no facet of the Black church and no facet of the AME church that Black women have not been a vital part of and do not continue to be a vital part of. And there are times when we are, not even times when, matter of fact, before I even say that, let me also say women are not the only ones making that contribution and make it necessary for us to have these types of conversations, but our sexual minorities, our queer brothers and sisters who have also made huge impacts and huge investments in the church and who make our church what it is, just like women, have often been locked out of certain positions and certain opportunities to be promoted, and opportunities to lead in the way that we have the capacity to lead, just because of sexism, misogyny, homophobia, and whatever else that might exist, that the respectability politics that play into all of that. And I think a large part of it is that we though we are an independent Black institution, and though we are born out of resistance and we are born out of mutual aid, there's still a residue of what we have experienced and what we have been subjected to. There's no person who at the core has not been an indelible mark has not been left on them by what they have been subjected to. It's like that saying, hurt people hurt people. Mm-hmm. We have been subjected to patriarchal things outside of our institution. We have been subjected to oppression, systemic oppression outside of our institution. We have been subjected to respectability politics that lock us out of particular positions in our outside. I don't know if y'all can still hear me.
I can still hear you.
Okay. And so we come into the church and we bring exactly what we have experienced outside the church into the church. And so sometimes women become the subjects of what Black men have been the subjects of outside of the church. Our queer brothers and sisters become the subjects of what has happened outside of the church, in the same way that we do with our children. And I shouldn't say our, because not me, but generally, it's the same dynamics that take place with our children and our families. We go to work, we're forced to smile, we're forced to fake cheer, to wear the mask, and just accept what we are experiencing, because we can't get fired. We got to pay the bills, we got to feed our family, right? And then we come home and all of that pent up frustration, we project onto our children, we project onto our spouses, we project onto our families. It's a form of internalized racism and internalized oppression, and those same things often show up in our church. I know that was a lot compared to what you actually asked, but I think all of that is important when we talk about the role of women. The mark that women have left on the church and the mark that our queer brothers and sisters have left on the church is indelible. We are vital members of the institution, but we are also sometimes the members of the institution that are most subjected to the worst parts of who we are.
Right, and that actually leads to the question that I had. So we're talking about the Black church, and you just talked about some of the things, I guess, that women of color, African American women go through. They don't always get the opportunities and the things of that nature. And since we're talking about the Black church and white evangelicals, prior to the Trump administration, there was a little bit of commingling between the Black church and white evangelical counterparts, right? And what I mean by that is, for example, Paula White, Pastor Paula White, Pastor Shel Brady, they've become household names because the African American church or the Black church gave them the opportunity to welcome them and to come in and to preach in their pulpits and to give their people their listening ears. And they have become well-known preachers and traveled all about, our congregations and things of that nature. And I feel like we have a great deal of African American people, women of color, who are fireballs, who are trailblazers in the ministry, who can preach some of us brothers under the pews. But I feel like I feel like we in some ways we've actually wronged Black women as it relates to not giving them opportunities. How can we right that wrong?
How can we right that wrong? Well, let me backtrack to the beginning of what you were saying about the Black church welcoming Paula White and folk like her into our pulpits and into our institutions. This is why I started the way that I started. It's very important for us to distinguish who is the Black church.
Right.
Because my Black church, even pre-Trump, would never have a Paula White in their in their pulpit. So it just would never be a thing. And so when you talk about the commingling, I don't know a Black church that was ever commingling with white evangelicalism. And I mean that by my definition of the Black church, not just a church with Black bodies in it. So that's that. When you ask the question about how we right the wrongs that have been done to Black women, it's almost like asking, how does America right the wrongs that have been done to Black people across the span of 400 years? And there is no real way to go back and make corrections. What you do is do better moving forward. So you give women the opportunities that they have earned and that they deserve. We can't ask for reparations because that's a little different, but you you say, I'm not just going to ordain you and let you sit under a male pastor's leadership. I'm going to assign you the pastorate so that you can lead. I am not just going to call your name on the Women's Day of the conference to preach on Women's Day of the conference, but I'm gonna call your name to preach the opening. I'm gonna call your name to preach the closing. You say, I'm not just going to elect one woman to be bishop. We're gonna elect every woman that run. And so it's not just from a leadership thing. It's from the top down and the bottom up. Everybody in our churches have to be investing in that dynamic, because I have been in churches, whether they be AME or otherwise, where somebody just a lay person might say to me, they want me to wear my lap scarf, or they want me to, I can't wear my pants in the pulpit. You know what? All of those types of things matter. We have to move differently. That is how we right the wrongs that are done to women. That sexism, where I want to dictate what you put on your body and how you put it on. I want to dictate how you sit and where you sit and how you stand and where you stand and when you speak. All of those types of things, from the lay to the clergy and the bishop on down. Everybody has to participate in a reworking of our theological perspective, because people will make a whole theological argument, however misguided, about the ways that women are treated. People will make whole biblical, they will take a pericope of scripture that is not even applicable, all out of context, right, to say, I don't want a woman pastor because women can't lead, whatever the case may be. So it takes all of us reworking our theological framework, reworking our political and social framework, this cultural structure that we have adopted and worn as our own, that has never belonged to us as an African people, and the ways that we engage one another, from the house to the church to the workspace, and from the top down and to the bottom up.
Right. And so one more question for you before I ask Reverend Brooks Reverend Thomas what I wanted to ask him. So where I grew up, some denominations don't believe, like you said, don't believe in women preaching. When I was a kid, my pastor at the time, he wasn't the biggest fan of women preaching. And it wasn't until I came out of the Baptist church, and I've, since growing up and witnessing different things for myself, to where I saw, women preaching and women preachers and things of that nature, and began to understand it and learn the value of women in ministry, and see powerful women in the Word of God. Do you feel like the AME Church is more progressive about female leaders than other denominations?
You finna ask me a question that's gonna get me in trouble if I answer any type of.
Look. Listen, we don't want you to get in trouble. We don't want you to get in trouble.
I think that our church is doing a much better job now than it has done in the past. But again, I pull in my queer brothers and sisters who have also been not only left out of that process of progress, but have been left out of conversations like these. I think that our church, as much progress as we have made, also still has work to do. We still have a lot of love to grow into, a lot of acceptance to grow into, and a lot of truths to live into. One being that I am a human being. I'm not just a woman. I'm a human being. The same thing with my queer brothers and sisters. They or non-binary. These are our siblings. These are human beings who are worthy of and deserving of the same opportunities that everyone else is, that men have been afforded the opportunity to grow into. And so I think we are making progress. We have made progress, but we have a lot of work to do.
Thank you, Reverend Thomas. I had something that I wanted to pick your brain about. So last week I spoke with Minister Chloe Speck. She's a Caucasian woman, and she was a part of the White Evangelical Church. She grew up in the White Evangelical Church, and she told me her testimony on my show last week. And one of the things that we talked about was she noticed the racism. She noticed a lot of different behavior that we saw in the Trump administration with a lot of white evangelicals. And one of the things that she said was their racism was subtle. to where it was always there, but it was kind of like mild and very subtle. My Would you agree that when it comes to white evangelicals, that the racism was subtle, particularly pre-Trump, and then not only that, how should we deal with, what should our relationship be with white evangelicals moving forward post-Trump? Because I feel like, because this is what I feel like. I feel like when it comes to white evangelicals, once a year on February the 2nd, up in Pennsylvania, they have what you call Groundhog Day. And so once a year they have this groundhog that will tell you whether you're going to have a long term of winter or you're going to have an early spring. And so once a year they take that groundhog out, show it for that one particular day, and put it back in the hole. And I feel like now that the Trump administration is gone, a lot of those racist evangelicals, their racism is not gone away. They just gone back into the hole until they get another opportunity for somebody to empower them to come back out again and spew all of their rhetoric so boldly the way that they have been doing it, to where it continues to create that division between the black church and a lot of hostility between the black church and white evangelicals. So how should we really deal with the evangelicals? Should we kind of keep our distance? Should we work towards reconciliation? Because I'm really torn on that.
There's a couple ways to answer this question. One, the historical concept of evangelicalism has gone through several different transformations. The one that we notice now was founded and built upon an intentional veiling of racist policies and an evasion of segregation, of integration. Jerry Falwell, Pat Robertson, a lot of these cats who started the modern day evangelical movement co-opted that term from a white liberal movement that was actually a return to a quote unquote social gospel. So when you look at the turn of the 20th century, you have Walter Rauschenbusch, you have people like Harry Emerson Fosdick, you have Karl Barth, you have Reinhold and H. Richard Niebuhr, who were, yes, they were white, they were liberal, neoliberal white men who were interested in maintaining white institutions, but they were trying to return the mainstream religious perspective to a social gospel. In 1970, after the signing of the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, and the Equal Housing Act in the late 60s, you have these white evangelical pastors from the South who come together and say, we are going to, even though we are the majority, we are going to retool and rebrand ourselves so that we are not perceived to be these racist Jim Crow pastors as evangelicals. And so they say we're going to go back to the word, but their interpretation of the scripture is created to be directly at odds with the prophetic lens of the black church and the black religious experiences. So when it comes to what we saw in the era of Trump, what we saw is what some of my siblings would call the showing of the slip. We saw the slip of white evangelicals. We saw it. This is who they've always been. This is what they've always tried to do. All they did is that they learned how to preach like Jakes. They learned how to preach like Juanita Bynum. And on that note, let me go back to this Paula White question.
Go ahead.
Paula White is from Maryland. She was in Maryland at the time that there was this major women's conference that was coming up called the Ebenezer's Women's Retreat. And at that time, these major black women preachers were coming from all over the country before it became cool to be a black woman that's in ministry, right? You have Renita Weems, Claudette Copeland. You have Judith McAllister coming for the music. You have Jackie McCullough. You have my mom, who was a part of that. You have Ann Lightner Fuller, Vashti McKenzie, Juanita Bynum, all these black women who are coming over there preaching these sermons in spaces where the black men in all spaces, not just Baptist or Kojic, but even in the AME church, where if they were to preach those sermons, they would be called witches and butches and bull dykes, because that's how they saw women who preach. At that same time, Paula White is learning how to mimic and become a white evangelical mascot, right? And so she finds, and not only finds how to mimic, but she starts plagiarizing the sermons of these black women, preaching them in black churches, AME churches, Baptist churches, some folk whose names I were to call, you would think, oh no, these are prophetic preachers. No, they were inviting Paula White And the Paula White rise to fame is solely also hinted and founded on the downfall of a black woman named Juanita Bynum. Once Juanita Bynum could not be controlled by Bishop T.D. Jakes, Bishop Jakes the next year at the Woman Thou Art Loose conference that was really built on the preaching of Juanita Bynum and Bishop Jakes, moves Juanita Bynum out the way, puts Paula White on stage, and she starts digging in some sandbox. And people start hyping her because there's always been this desire to be adjacent to whiteness in all ways, shapes, or forms. And so when it comes to what we've seen now, the profile that Paula White has now, as you said, my dear brother, is solely built upon the fact that black churches supported her when white churches wouldn't. She wasn't preaching at no white churches. She wasn't preaching for John Hagee. The only person she might have preached for was her male counterpart who did the same thing, and that's Rod Parsley. And so you have Rod Parsley, you have Paula White that make the space for white young evangelicals that will mimic the movement of church planting in the late 90s and early 2000s, like the Tony Lees, the Jamal Bryants, the Matthew Watleys, the Keith Battles, the R.A. Vernons, who created these churches that were assigned to reach those who have been moved out the churches. They mimic it and become Stephen Furtick. They become Carl Lentz. They become Perry Noble. They become the guy up in Wyoming. They mimic it. And then when it comes time for them to put their theology where their aesthetic is, they're nowhere to be found. And so at this point, I hope that we are not gullible enough to believe that reconciliation with people who have not asked for forgiveness, that do not intend to change their ways, that do not intend to alter their behavior, is a moot point, and we ought to seek revolution over reconciliation.
Listen, listen. So I don't know if you can see the screen. Reverend Thomas, Tammy Ford, she says, "Come on, break it down." Listen, this is my mother, my biological mother, and it sounds like you blessing her life right there. So yeah, my mama and my wife, they one of my biggest supporters. And so I started to take these headphones off and literally run around this little small office and lose my stuff, because that is the most bona fide truth I've never heard in a whole different perspective as it relates to looking at this. You say they haven't asked for forgiveness, and you're right, they haven't asked for forgiveness. They've gone back. I ain't really heard nothing from Paula White, from any of these white evangelicals since this election has gone on and things of that nature. Like I said, they done crawled back in their holes. And honestly, Reverend Brooks, I'm not a woman, but I actually feel based upon what Reverend Thomas said, I actually feel disrespected on the behalf of all African and women in ministry, because of the mere fact is I feel like y'all have been slated in many different ways, and in many different ways disrespected at the same time, to where I feel like in some ways we haven't honored women the way we're supposed to, and part of that honoring is to protect and to make sure that y'all have y'all opportunities to shine and to do what thus said the Lord according to your life, and to function in your call, and to give you those opportunities and to create those safe spaces for you all to function and do what you have to do. And so I'm just gonna say this: listen, on behalf of the women, look, on men, I apologize for any black women that may have feel slated in ministry, that might not have gotten the opportunity. The Lord put something on your heart, and for whatever reason, men may not have given y'all the space and created those safe spaces. I apologize, because listen, who are we to tell a woman, that you can't do X, Y, Z, that you can't function in ministry, that you can't preach, that you can't do, the same thing that a man can do in ministry? Because in the Word of God, we see it. We see powerful women, Old and New Testament, who are just really on those front lines and are really holding it down and really spreading the gospel. And I talked about this a couple of weeks ago when I had a friend of mine on the show who also goes to Wesley, and we talked about women in ministry. And we talked about Phoebe, and even the book of Romans. The reason to why we have the book of Romans is because a woman carried it, not only delivered it, but she read the book. And not only did she read the book, she was authorized by the apostle to answer any questions that the people may have had concerning what he wrote. And so that's a powerful thing, and like I said, I'm really looking at this thing totally differently. I have a whole new respect for women in ministry, because I feel like y'all got to go through a lot of other stuff just to be able to exist and to say, I deserve to be here. So that's a powerful thing, and like I said, I pray that the Lord continues to cover y'all in ministry and to continue to do what God has put on your heart, and to continue to take up the assignment and to just go and run with it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. And I accept that apology. Let me also say that along with that apology from men, there has to be a work that goes along with that.
Right.
The sentiment is beautiful. We appreciate the sentiment, but also you're going to have to work to dismantle the patriarchal systems, because ultimately, the only way we dismantle systems of patriarchy and misogyny and sexism that lock women out of opportunities and lock women out of operating in their full gift, the only thing that dismantles those systems is those who benefit from those systems saying no more. I'm not going to participate anymore. I will not allow it to continue to manifest. You all have to do that work. Now, yeah, I'm gonna just leave that. I'm gonna leave it at that.
And that's why I asked the question: how can we right that wrong? Because in my opinion, I don't want to assume that this is what's going to right the wrong, because you have to go to those that you've hurt or those that may feel slighted and say, how can we fix this? And that's why I asked that question, because me personally, I want to know. Like I want to know how to make it right, so that moving forward that we can do better, because we know better. And so, if you don't ask those questions, sometimes you might never get it right, because that might not be enough to those that have been slighted and hurt. And so that's kind of why I was asking asking that question ahead of time. So that's why I was asking that question. So look, we got that. That's the white unapologetic privilege. That's my wife there. So she said, misogyny, just like racism and other isms, requires acknowledgement and action. And that is so true. I had a question. So, Reverend Thomas, you talked about, you said a lot, and you was blessing our life, Rev. And so the thing the behavior and the rhetoric of white evangelicals, everything that we saw during the Trump administration, and we saw a lot of the boldness between a lot of white evangelicals, a lot of white preachers who were heavy Trump supporters. Do you think that their behavior was the nod for the need of the black church? Because I feel like we still need the church. We will always need the black church. But that behavior that we saw during the Trump administration, does that give the go ahead to the nod to continue to see the need for the black church, and what is our need now in 2021? Now, because you gave us the rundown of what happened during Richard Allen's time and the early founders of the AME Church. What is the need for the black church today?
I think one is an acknowledgement, and I appreciate that question. One is an acknowledgement that Trump is not an anomaly. He is an intentional product, and he is, as my folk in marketing would say, is on brand for what this country has been. Before there was Donald Trump, you and I both grew up in the DMV. We saw firsthand the products of Ronald Reagan. Ronald Wilson Reagan was Donald Trump with a commercial deal. He is Donald Trump with a vocabulary, the same ideologies, the same policies, demands. The only difference is that Ronald Reagan didn't have a Twitter account. And so what we have seen with Donald Trump, and what we will see, because he's not done, I just want to be very clear, is that there has always been a line of black clergy of all backgrounds who have rebelled against white supremacy whenever and wherever it reared its ugly racist head. What we now must do is confess that we have, over the last 50 years, and I say we as a part of those of us who are a part of the black religious experience, have allowed for white evangelicals to co-opt our theology and under the guise of reconciliation, to allow them to de-radicalize a theology that has always been radical. always been radical in one way, shape, or form, even though it hasn't always been radical as it related to women and to sexual minorities, to young people, and to people who were not of a certain social class. The Black church is built on radicalism. It's always been built on resistance. And the whole purpose of white evangelicalism was to de-radicalize the Black church. That's why TBN started putting on a Carlton Pearson, who at the time was the poster child for this is what can happen for you if you as a Negro will dance to our tune. And the moment that he started to push back on the limits of their theology, we cast him out and put him in exile. And so what we must do not only is to acknowledge the history, but also we need to confess some things. We need to confess our sins. We need to confess the way that we've treated women. We need to confess to the fact that women started the majority of our local churches, but we only appointed men to pastor them. We need to acknowledge the realities of our desire to be so close to whiteness that we will sell out our people just so that we can pray at City Hall. And once we acknowledge and confess our desire to be white, and to acknowledge that we want to be close to, and we want to be accepted by, and we want, that's why, and I'm gonna be real, this is why a lot of these younger Gen X kind of pastors who are pastoring started to dress a certain way in the last 5 years, is because they want to get the call from Elevation Church to preach. They want to get the call to speak at the white conferences, the white millennials, who are really just doing what Black churches were doing 20 years ago with more money. That's it. Stephen Furtick didn't invent preaching in jeans. All these cats didn't start doing. Look, I wanted to do a paper a few years ago called "The Gentrification of Black Church Punk."
Do it.
These cats took the blueprint of what somebody like a Keith Battle, and particularly, you know, however you may feel about him, Jamal Harrison Bryant, as a pioneer for what new church looks like, copied it. Guarantee you this. I guarantee you this. Look at every major church plant that we call on today. Look at their model and tell me when they were founded. I guarantee you none of them were founded before 1996. When you start seeing these churches rise up, and the majority of them were founded after R.A. Vernon, after Jamal Bryant was 29 years old, preaching about justice and preaching about hip hop on BET, before there was a Furtick, before there was a Perry Noble, before there was a Carl Lentz. They took that model. And once we confess that we were willing to surrender our birthright for a piece of stew so we can sit at their table, so that we can be on their programs, we can acknowledge that we need to move forward, that we don't need Stephen Furtick to do what we need to do. We don't need these white evangelicals to do what we need to do, but we've got our own. In fact, to quote this great elder, we need to search for our mother's gardens. We need to search for our lineage. We need to search for our roots and realize that we have our own tree. Stop trying to plant the seeds of Black liberation and revolution that are the roots of Black religiosity in soil that has been contaminated by the toxins of white supremacy, misogyny, and racism, and expecting to grow a tree that's going to grow fruit that's going to benefit our people rather than kill them. We need to acknowledge what we have done and how we have chased after whiteness. And when we acknowledge that, then we can start the process of becoming the Black church again, because what we've been and what a lot of churches have been white evangelical churches in blackface.
I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready for none of what you just said. I tell you, I was not ready. That if that ain't the truth, you know everything you just said, Reverend Thomas. I don't know if you've seen it. I don't know, Reverend Brooks, if you've seen the series or the series Lovecraft Country. But everything he just said reminded me of Lovecraft Country, and I love Lovecraft Country. I thought it was very interesting. But the sister, I can't think of her name, the one to where she was behind closed doors, she was a black woman, but she had the ability to put on whiteness, and I guess the individual who did that played on, you know, that low key desire and that low key want to be able to one day feel like what it means to be white, and she was able to be white while she was outside amongst the people and treat people as if she was a white woman and to do things the way a white woman would. What you just said, that's exactly what reminded me of that. And I believe there's a lot of things that we must do. There's a lot of things we must say to each other. We got to get behind closed doors and iron out and hash out all of our differences, say our apologies, fix whatever wrongs, like I was saying earlier to Reverend Brooks. Whatever way we've wronged, women in ministry, we need to fix that. We need to fix the stuff that we done wrong. We need to be able to heal, so that way we can be a stronger force, so that when stuff like Trump happens and the Lindsey Grahams and they start to thrive and to do what they do, we can be a strong, united force. And not just be a strong, united force, but to really see the progress on a fast pace. It's just amazing. It's amazing. The struggles and the challenges. Go ahead.
If I can add just something real quick.
Go ahead.
You were saying and what I said. At the turn of the 20th century, at the rise of silent films, there was an actor by the name of Burt Williams.
Right.
And at the time, they did not allow black people to act in motion pictures, in silent films, or whatever. But Burt Williams, in order for him to make a living and in order for him to appear on screen as a dark-skinned black man, had to put on blackface. And the reality of it is he was already black, but he had to put on blackface. And what that means is that sometimes, in order to gain access to capitalism, we must put on the mask, as Reverend Brooks said, and also as Paul Lawrence Dunbar said, we have to wear the mask. And then after we wear the mask, we have to act out the iterations and the stereotypes of white supremacy so that we can continue to be accepted and acknowledged. So you have a Stepin Fetchit. Now Stepin Fetchit is Bishop Stepin Fetchit. Now Mantan Moreland is Apostle Mantan Moreland. And it's not necessarily in the way that they carry themselves, but it's in their theology. Their theology is rooted in white supremacy. And just because you wear skinny jeans doesn't mean you're less of a pickaninny, period. Like you're not less of a minstrel show just because you can have a dashiki on your body, but your theology wears a Klan robe. And that's essentially what I want us to get away from. I want us to acknowledge and confess the roots of our desire to be close to whiteness and abandon that and recognize that we have, in the words of Dwight Hopkins, God has given us shoes that fit our own feet.
Well, there you have it. Reverend Thomas and Reverend Brooks, I thank you guys so much for coming on this podcast and really being a blessing. This is the first time I've had two guests at one time on my podcast. And let me tell you something, I was blessed by the both of you. I thank you guys so much for taking time out of your schedules, because I know y'all are movers and shakers and doing powerful things in the body of Christ, in the black church, and in the AME church. And I thank you guys so much for being diligent, for being fellow young preachers, just holding it down and really doing what thus said the Lord and really following the plan of God for your lives. And I really pray that the Lord continues to order your steps and continue to guide and lead you all, continue to preach that liberation, continue to preach justice, and continue to do what God has put you on this earth to do. And I'm going to tell you, just like I tell a lot of other people that come on my show that do awesome things and say awesome things, this ain't going to be the last time either one of y'all come on my show. So let's just go and say that and put that out there. Y'all can expect to hear back from me, because I'm definitely going to bring you guys back on to have some other conversations, because there are going to be other things that come up. There are going to be other things that we got to talk about and discuss, and to really help educate, edify, and help our people to move forward. Because I feel like I don't come on here to play podcasts. I come on here to really help my people. And if I can bring other people like you all that are in ministry, that are young, that are examples to other women in ministry, to other young men, in ministry that may need to be able to see some Reverend Brooks, or be able to see some Reverend Thomas, to say that it is possible to even be in 2021 where there's a lot of hell going on, and we can still speak for God and really live for God and really and really do what a lot of other people are scared to do. So on that note, I want to thank y'all. But y'all hold on one second. I'm gonna close out the show. So there you have it, guys. That's Reverend Thomas and Reverend Brooks. I want to thank them so much for coming on to the podcast tonight. Listen, I want y'all to go follow them. Go follow them on Twitter. Go follow them on Facebook, on Instagram. I put up their lower thirds. I put up their social media handles. So y'all go follow them. Go check them out on YouTube. But they are some powerful people. I see my dad in the chat, Pastor Robert Johnson. That's Reverend Thomas. That's my dad, Robert Johnson. That's my dad. Hey, Dad, I love you. He just had surgery. My mom is here. My wife is here. Everybody is here. Thank y'all so much for being supportive and just checking in on little old Deontay over here, making sure that I'm doing the right thing. So y'all, listen. I want y'all to do me a favor. I'm going to put this up on my YouTube page. All right, so y'all go follow me. Go follow me right there at Deontay Carroll. Because I'm going to put this on my YouTube page for you guys to go back and see. Also follow me on Facebook right there at Deontay J. Carroll Sr. You can also follow me on Instagram at Deontay Carroll. I also got a website. Y'all go get my books. I got 2 books out. Go get them. www.deontaycarroll.com. And I'm also on Twitter. I believe I put it up there earlier. I'm on Twitter at Deontay J. Carroll. All one word. And listen. Please do me a favor. Continue to be blessed. Continue to take care of yourselves. Continue to inspire your people and to be an amazing force out here in this world. And listen, the Lord loves you. I love you. And until next time, y'all do me a favor and keep that volume turned up. Be blessed.